Everyone, and welcome to today's Delaware Public Service Commission meeting. A very important announcement to kick off the meeting. That is that we're honored to have as one of our new Deputy Attorney Generals, Bob Willard. Bob has been a Deputy Attorney General for over 20 years, so he brings a lot of experience to the table. He's going to be learning the utility area very quickly. He's a University of Delaware Blue Hen stalwart, and welcome aboard, Bob. The first thing on the agenda is a reading of the meeting minutes of May 17, 2016, which hopefully we will waive. Does anyone have any suggested changes or amendments to the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I have one suggestion on page 3 of the minutes, the last paragraph. Commissioner Gray stated he received a lot of positive feedback regarding the settlement rate credits. I would recommend we put Exelon settlement rate credits, please.
Is our Madam Secretary, do you have that? Would someone like to make a motion and polish that up?
I move that the minutes be adopted as corrected.
I second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes as amended? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Consent agenda, we have, I believe, 5 items on the consent agenda. Does any commissioner wish to take any of the items on the consent agenda off the consent agenda and onto the regular agenda?
Move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. On to the regular agenda. The first matter is in the matter of the tariff filing of Chesapeake Utilities Corporation. Reference there's, quote, CHFF, end of quote. City of Harrington. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Bill O'Brien, Associate General Counsel of Chesapeake Utilities Corporation. You have before you proposed order number 8892, which opens docket 16-0642 to consider Chesapeake's application for approval for a new gas service tariff schedule called the City of Harrington Franchise Fee Rider. Chesapeake recently renewed and renegotiated its franchise agreement with the City of Harrington, and that franchise agreement includes a franchise fee that, subject to commission approval, would be collected from the residents and businesses located within the city in order to collect dollar for dollar the franchise fee which is in the franchise agreement, and to pay that fee to the City of Harrington. What this order does is it suspends the rate temporarily. It directs the company to publish public notice of the application, and it sets an intervention period and a period for public comment. It also sets a hearing date for July 12th directly in front of the commission, but reserves the opportunity to send it to a hearing examiner if there are objections filed against the application. I believe you have a revised form of order that went out after the board package was sent to the commissioners, and that revision is simply to change the date for the end of the comment period and the intervention period to July 11th, one day prior to the hearing in front of the commission rather than July 12th, the day of the hearing. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Commissioner Conaway, do you have any correction of the name of the city, how he pronounces that city?
Harrington.
Yep, okay. The record should reflect the correct pronunciation of Harrington. Ms. Mayrek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Mr. O'Brien has accurately summarized the order as amended that you have before you. That's order number 8892 in docket 16-0642. Staff is in support of the Commission's approval of this order as amended by Mr. O'Brien, which would change the deadline order is available if there are any questions from the commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. Mayrack. Ms. Moucher,
The public advocate supports the order as well.
thank you very much. And I appreciate your being here. Any commissioners have any questions of the parties? May we have a motion?
Motion to approve order number 8892 as amended to reflect the July 11th date.
I second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order number 8892 with the July 11th date? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Thank you, Ms. Mayrack and Ms. Moucher. Number 2 is in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Light Company for an increase in electric base rates and miscellaneous tariff changes. Welcome, Mr. Goodman. I guess actually Jim Geddes will be doing this. This is an opening, I believe, so Mr. Geddes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is an opening order dealing with Delmarva's application for a change in electric rates. The formal order is familiar to the commissioners. It would suspend the rates on a temporary basis. It would allow for minimum rate relief under Section 206C. It would waive the bond provisions that the statute requires. It would also remove some of the minimum filing requirements. One of those would also provision in which it is provide notice of the application, appoint a hearing, and set a date for filing decision. Staff recommends your favorable consideration of this opening order.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Mr. Goodman?
Staff shared this with us. We reviewed it, and we're pleased with it.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Ms. Moucher?
Public advocate supports this order.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners regarding the proposed order?
Mr. Chair, I have a question or two. When I read through some of the preliminary information that I received, it looked like the justification was put forward for the rate increase on a test year, December 2015.
Yes, the year 2015, 12 months ending.
Not sure I see it now in the detail, but it looked like the waiver request was for net operating financials year 2014. So I'm not sure what you're bringing forward in the rate case. Is it 2015 test year or 2014 test year?
It is the test year for the 12 months ending December 31st, 2015. So it's the year, the 12 months of 2015.
And so the net operating financials that will become a part of the record are the year 2015 net operating or year 2014?
Correct. That's the test period. Yes, 2015.
Okay, because maybe I should ask one of the attorneys to help me out here. I think that in some of the record, it points out that net operating information will be provided for year 2014. So I'm struggling a little bit to determine whether we're in the right year for net operating and for test case.
If, point of clarification, obviously under the minimum filing requirements, the company can file a projected test period as distinguished from a test year should it choose to do so. In the last Delmarva case, 13115, the company chose to file a test period that was coincident with the test year and updated for known and measurable changes to the rate effective period. Now, with regard to your question about 2014 financials, I have not gone through the application with that degree of specificity, but I assume that information will be brought forward. But the big issue is one that I think the staff and obviously the public is interested in is the fact that the test period on which this commission will be asked to set rates is the calendar 2015, and there are no projected increases as in that test period moving forward. 6 months in advance as compared to the test year. So So it is a different type of filing, but it's not without precedent. The company uses mechanic in the last case, and I believe the case before, well, 2012.
I think it was the 09 case, but yeah.
But in any event, this is not the case.
Okay. All right. So I'm about as clear as mud, but wait for some of the testimony to come forward.
Well, that's our obligation then to make it more clear for you, Your Honor. So we'll do that. If I may introduce someone,
Certainly, Mr. Goodman.
Chairman. This is Shivos Sarkar. He is going into his third year of law school, and we take a law clerk for a year every year. He works for us full-time in the summer and then part-time while he's at school. Well, I learned something disturbing at lunch, that before he came to work, or came to law school, he was a professional volleyball coach on the beach in California, and he gave that all up to come east and go to law school. So I'm not questioning his judgment a little, but I wanted to introduce him anyway. And
I would check
you'll be
it.
seeing him throughout the year with us here, and seems like a good guy.
Great. Well, welcome and best wishes to you, sir.
Thank you.
And where do you attend law school?
Rutgers. So he went from California to New Jersey. Now you really got to
Yeah.
question that.
They do have beaches that age.
Yes.
And in
Well,
Delaware.
there's no beaches in New Jersey. The shores there. but
Yes.
the
We
beaches
have
are-
beaches.
The beaches are only in Delaware.
Yes.
Well, not only. Well, I do think we have a matter of business still on the table. So maybe we have a motion with respect to proposed order 8900.
Move we adopt order number 8900 as presented.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order 8900? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Mr. Goodman.
Thank you.
Good luck, Mr. Kazar.
Sarkar.
Sarkar. Thank you, sir. The next item, number 3 on the regular agenda, is in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Light Company for an increase in its natural gas base rates and miscellaneous tariff changes. Welcome, Ms. Scott. And I guess on this one as well, it's an opening order, I believe, so Mr. Geddes will refer back to this, start us off.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This order in form is similar to the one that you've just considered and approved during the electric division of the company. This is the gas application, which is essentially filed at the same time that it filed the same application. It does a similar thing in that it suspends the rates set forth in the application. It allows for minimum rate relief, waive the bond requirements. Also creates a waiver for some of the minimum filing requirements, which includes a publication notice, an appointment of hearing examiner, and sets a date for convention. So that again would ask your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. The company has had the opportunity to review the form of order, and we agree with the form and would ask that you approve it as submitted.
Thank you very much. Ms. Moucher? Thank you, Ms. Moucher. Any questions, commissioners?
Move we adopt order number 8899 as presented.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order 8899? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Geddes, Ms. Scott, and Ms. Moucher. Next on the hearing schedule, we have a blank slate, which is not, which is unusual, but very acceptable. Next is the director's public comment, I guess, is next. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to make any comment to the Public Service Commission? I think no one's approaching, so I guess we should go on to the next item on the calendar, which is the director's, or the agenda, the director's comments. Mr. Howard.
Chairman Winslow, Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to talk with you once again. As you may be aware, If you've been reading any of the newspaper articles, the Artificial Island project and costs and the FERC denial of our complaint has all been front and center. And we are at this point sharing with you some concerns that we have and perhaps a suggestion on how we might move forward with that. So I would ask Mr. Farber to come up and share with you his approach to this particular issue at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Howitt. Chairman Winslow, Commissioners, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This item is to address a proposed letter that staff is recommending be sent to the PJM board concerning the Artificial Island project. And as discussed in the letter, PJM has been helpful, responsive, and accommodating regarding the Artificial Island issue. When staff has requested information from PJM, their staff has been responsive. They've been accommodating. They've met with us a number of times by phone or otherwise, and they've been very helpful. So this letter is basically a request for PJM to support what it's already recognized, particularly at the technical conference regarding Artificial Island. Mainly, what was recognized and what has been recognized by PJM is that there is a separately identifiable category of projects that have been approved by the PJM board and included in the Regional Transmission Expansion Plan, or the RTEP. And in PJM's filing of comments before the technical conference, I would again recognize that PJM did not take a position opposing what Delaware was suggesting in his complaint, but rather documenting of those 1,200 plus RTEP projects, what were the categories. And of those 1,200 plus projects, PJM identified generation deliverability as a separately identifiable category, which had one project, the Artificial Island project, out of the 1,248 that had been included in the RTEP. Additionally, PJM was helpful in identifying benefits that occurred to zones beyond the Delmarva zone, in analyzing changes in the economics as a result of the operation of the facilities. What PJM was able to identify at the technical conference, that it was not, the analysis was not meant to prescribe absolute values, but rather to provide the relative values that went beyond to almost every other zone in PJM as a result of the operation of the Artificial Island facility. So there was an establishment of an ex ante or before the fact cost allocation that was available for the Artificial Island project. As you noticed in our complaint, those were the two main criteria that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or the FERC, established as necessary in order to agree with the Delaware complaint. We felt that we met that criteria. That was a subject to our rehearing. What this letter tries to do is request that PJM take the next step beyond recognition of the criteria that was met in our complaint, and file a letter with the FERC supporting what is already recognized. And I would also note that I've had discussions with the Maryland Public Service Commission, and they've agreed to either support or join in this letter before we file it or send it to the PJM board. So it's just a question of if the commission here decides to accept staff's recommendation, how we would frame this to include the Maryland Commission as well. So with that, I would place my recommendation, staff's recommendation, to send this letter to the PJM board as I summarized.
Any commissioner have any questions of Mr. Farber?
Mr. Chair, I have a statement. I'm still a little confused, I guess. If you read the press, And if PJM at the executive level says that the cost allocation to the Delaware ratepayer is lower than we have claimed it is, what is closing that gap with the steps that you recommend we take?
Well, Commissioner Gray, thanks for that question. There's been a lot of discussion as to cost impacts. Unfortunately, there are innumerable ways to slice and dice these costs. What staff has done and presented to you the last time that we discussed this is there were certain cost estimates that were provided. There were increases, and staff applied a nominal carrying charge of 20% in order to get the impact on the revenue requirement, which is what is used basically as a numerator in order to derive a rate per kW, peak load contribution kW. So in arriving at the Delaware impact, there's certain factors involved. Basically, it's the slicing up of the Delmarva zone total peak load contribution. And that peak load contribution represents portions of Delaware that are retail customers served by Delmarva. There are Delaware impacts associated with the municipals, DMEC, as well as the cooperatives, ODEC mainly. And there are also impacts in the Delmarva zone that are reflected in that total peak load contribution affecting Maryland. Delmarva serves Maryland customers, as well as the city of Easton. And then there's Virginia impacts. So it boils down to those impacts that staff had calculated and need to be sliced up a number of ways. Ultimately, in terms of what concerns this commission, there's basically a 41% cost responsibility of the revenue requirements that impact the rate. So 60% of the costs are still in the Delmarva zone, but they're not flowing through to the Delmarva retail customers. So that's what staff had calculated. Going through those calculations, the increase associated just with Artificial Island was $1.43 per kilowatt of peak load contribution. The existing transmission revenue requirement that was a base that our Artificial Island was added to in order to come up to its total was about $2.67 per peak load contribution kW. So for a total transmission cost, including Artificial Island, of $4.10 roughly. In order to further that down into a residential customer, staff made an estimate of approximately 3 kWs of peak load contribution for a residential customer. So with that estimate, then the $1.43 for Artificial Island came to a little over $4 just for the artificial impact. The existing transmission cost at that estimated peak load contribution came to about $7, more than $7. So for the total transmission cost for a typical or an estimated residential customer, it was $11, almost $12 per month as a result of those calculations. So because all those numbers are sliced and diced different ways, some entities have picked it up and reported it in different fashion, but I think we're all dealing with the same bundle of costs, believe it or not.
I think the bottom line, I think Commissioner Gray, is that one should not trust in what one reads in the News Journal as being accurate new math. So I do believe that issue is being worked, and that we want to make sure that the media is aware of the actual, figures and what the actual impact is. And I think we're in the process of addressing that in other ways. This letter, also, I believe that Mr. Farber would acknowledge that this controversy really has not undercut the legitimacy of our legal arguments at FERC for the motion for reconsideration. They're still substantial. There's still considerable merit in those positions we've taken. And obviously, PGM has been supportive in a variety of ways with respect to this issue. We just want to give them the opportunity to be a little bit more helpful. And I think this letter would push them in that direction, and we'll have to see what decision they make as a result of receiving the letter.
So I think I'm clearer now. I just wanted to make sure that the issuing of this letter, supportive or not supportive in different contexts, was not going to be overshadowed by this debate as to whether or not we're getting 90% or 60% of the costs. So I'm pleased with the letter and the approach that we're taking. I just want to make sure that other issue isn't going to out.
Well, Commissioner Gray, let me respond to that in two ways. The letter is consistent with and supports the complaint that the Delaware Commission and Maryland Commission has filed. It reinforces the arguments that were made as well as their hearing requests. So this is entirely consistent with what has been filed at the FERC regarding this issue. Regarding the cost issue, I don't know if Ms. Compton is in the room, but she has gone to great lengths to amplify our website so that information has been presented to those who want to bother trying to find it, that provides the details necessary to understand what the costs were, what they were estimated, why they were estimated, and how the impacts were derived. So that information is now available on our website, and it should be helpful, I would expect, for anybody who's interested in finding out what the facts are. To assist them.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gregg, any other commissioner have a question of Mr. Farber? We entertain a motion to approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the staff's request to communicate with the PJM board on the action that presently pending at FERC? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr.
Chairman Winslow,
Farber.
Commissioners. If I could follow up with one clarification. Does the Commission have a preference into how to include the Maryland PSC, either as joining the letter or filing a separate letter of support? Is there a preference? Or
Speaking for only myself, I don't think we would love to have their support in any fashion that they are going to give it to us.
Very well.
Just supplementally, I would say that we should go and request their support.
Yes.
But if they decline, I still think we should issue the letter.
Well, as I mentioned, they've already agreed to support it. It's just a question of what form, either joining the letter or filing a separate letter of their own, supporting the Delaware letter.
Strengthen numbers.
Yeah.
But that's one way to look at it. All right, we'll work it out with Maryland and file it that way. Thank you.
Are you leaving us, or are you going to discuss the next one as well?
Before Chairman Winslow, if I may, before he does that, if I could just muddy the waters just one little bit.
Okay.
I would like to emphasize that while the News Journal article did get a few things wrong, there was a lot of right information in the article. And what you have to be careful about is how you're looking at these issues. If you're looking at it from the PJM perspective, and I believe Mr. Hurling's perspective, you will notice that the flows of energy coming across that line are certainly going to come into Delaware, and they're going to go to Maryland and Virginia. So when you read that article, you saw that of the flows coming over here, and we can argue about what that number is, but the flows coming over here, 60% will probably be used in Delaware, and the other 40% will probably be used in Maryland and Virginia. And if you believe that's the benefit, then that's the basis of your cost allocation. But our whole argument has been that's not the benefit that we believe should be used for the cost allocation. We believe the benefit that should be used is the market price impacts of the flow coming across that line. And so therefore you wind up with different costs and different allocations. And that goes back to the 90-10 that everybody's been talking about. 90% of the cost for only 10% of the benefit. The one thing we have to be very careful about is that we have to acknowledge that the line does benefit Delaware. We're not arguing that it doesn't benefit Delaware. We're just arguing that it doesn't benefit Delaware commensurate with the amount of cost that we would be paying. And so that's the argument that we have, and that's the legal argument that we're trying to pursue at FERC. I don't think the cost issue will override the legal arguments about the cost allocation at FERC, and I think we're in a good position to continue to pursue that cost allocation issue at FERC, despite the news journal's attributions of Virginia getting 40%. If I was Virginia, I'd be intervening in this case very quickly if I actually believed that number. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Thank you. I would also ask Mr. Farber to take this opportunity to talk about some of the latest developments in FERC docket EL 05-121 regarding cost responsibility for the high voltage enhancements that had been approved by the PJM board prior to February 1st, 2013. We have intervened in that case, and there have been settlement discussions, and I will defer to Mr. Farber.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Chairman Winslow, Commissioners, good afternoon. This item is to discuss settlement discussions that have occurred in docket EL 05-121, as has been publicly noticed. The issues concern the assignment of cost allocation for certain transmission facilities that operate at 500 kV and above, and there have been 8 settlement conferences. I think I attended all of them. And as noted in the status report issued by Judge Sterner, that we're in the process of drafting and exchanging a settlement agreement. It is that settlement agreement that is a result of confidential discussions and is still confidential, as has not been submitted to FERC or is not publicly available, that I would respectfully request an executive session in order to discuss this proposed settlement agreement.
Okay, I think that's very appropriate. Before we do that, if we could, I see that Mr. Noyes is in the room. In the event he does wish to leave and not stay around and wait outside while the executive session is on, is there anything you'd like to report to the Commission?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say that the Division of Energy and Climate emphatically appreciates all the work that's being done on these issues by staff, the Commission, and public advocate. So I'm not actually cutting out of here and looking back for a discussion. The only other thing I would add is that the Delaware Power SRAC auction is open for business and closes at the end of business on Friday. And anybody wanting to know how to bid or any information on that, go to sracdelaware.com, which is an excellent resource for participating in the auction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Noyes. May we have a motion to go into executive session? And the executive session will just be PSC staff and the commissioners.
So moved.
Can I just note for the record the reason for going into
Yes.
executive session, please? It's to discuss confidential settlement negotiations with respect to potential litigation.
Thank you, Ms. Mayrack. Was there a second?
Yes.
Yes, there was. Is there any discussion on the motion to go into executive session? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We're going to go into executive session. Please be sure the internet is also on the outside